I just want to say it's a little after 7. We're going to still wait a few minutes, maybe till 10 after, and see if enough people show up to have a quorum. We have 38, and I believe a quorum is 45.
But
Yep.
quickly vote while we have enough people.
Okay, so
We have
so
enough
I'm going to push the button that sets off the poll or the vote. You'll notice, for instance, it says, well, first, no, before that, it's like Stacy's running for president. Rebecca's running for secretary. And I have to ask if anyone would like to nominate themselves or anyone else from the floor. Daniel says no.
I thought he was
Okay.
nominating himself.
Oh, maybe.
Don't hold
Okay.
back if you're interested.
Mhm.
Okay.
That's right, right?
All right, nobody's jumping up and down. Okay, well, when the poll shows up, question 1 is going to say like president, and then it'll have Stacy's name, and there'll be an other button. And question 2 is that other. If you want to write someone in, it gives you the option to do a write-in, and then the same thing is true on the secretary side. So here we go. 45 of 45, they did.
All right.
All right. That was
Thank
quite a
you.
fundraiser.
Telling you.
All right, so I just became the lame duck president, which is a nice thing.
Are you gonna quack?
Wah.
Yeah.
All
there we
right.
go.
Okay. We're done.
All right.
Yay.
Well, thank you
Yay.
all for your vote of confidence.
Congratulations, Stacy.
I assume that they won, and now we can congratulate Rebecca and
Yes.
Stacy.
And Rebecca.
Congratulations.
That's wonderful. We do have our presentations for the summer residents, right?
Yeah,
And
we have a couple of
Rebecca.
other things too. Yeah.
Okay.
So the rest of the agenda here, I was going to do this up front, and we were just talking, and I just forgot. So we did the vote. There's a presentation. Stacy's going to do a presentation on membership. I've recorded about a 4-minute video I'm going to play that gives a high level look at the recommendations that the All Things Shows and Sales Committee is making regarding jurying, and a way to get involved in further conversation about that if you want to. And then the residencies presentations. So on to the president-elect.
So the first thing, you're going to be sorry you voted for me. Okay, so I am going to give a presentation about the dues for the dues and the categories, the tiers for 2024. Now let me share my screen. And let me slideshow from beginning. Okay, y'all can see this?
Yep.
Okay, and then I'm just gonna, okay, excellent. Okay, so the dues for the Potter's Guild are under the purview of the board of directors. The board of directors had a very long conversation over a number of meetings about the restructuring the tiers a little bit and raising the dues for 2024. So I'm here to explain this and explain why the board thought that this was necessary, and to give you guys an opportunity to provide your feedback in terms of what you think. And most importantly, as you get to the end, what you'd like us, what your thoughts are about a vision going forward for what we should be using our resources for. Okay. So I don't expect you guys to read this. And I want to especially take a moment to thank Brenda Burgess and Troy Schmidt and Patty Hallows for putting together this dues history. And we'll talk about it in detail in a little bit, but really all I'm trying to demonstrate here is that the history of the dues in the Potter's Guild has been a dynamic thing. Membership categories have come and gone. There was a non-Ventura County resident category for a while. The dues started in 1967 at $5 each, and now they are currently up to $45 each they're now currently up to $30 each for regular membership. So we've gone from $5 to $25. And in 2022, you all remember, I'm sure, that we implemented a new membership tier, a plus tier. Plus members get additional benefits than regular members, the bulk clay ordering, the selling at guild venues and online. And we also ask plus members to contribute hours to guild activities through team service. The idea is if the plus members are getting the additional benefits, we need the additional person hours to be able to provide all of these additional benefits. Now, the difference between the regular and plus member, which is $20 for individuals and $30 for couples, is deposited in a future fund. So here it is. Regular singles now 30, regular couple is now 45, regular student is 20, a plus single is 50, but $20 of that goes into the future fund, and a plus couple is 75, but $30 of that goes into the future fund. We have 53 regular members, 114 plus members, 7 students, 178 members, and 4 lifetime members. This is where the Guild has suggested we go in 2024. An increase of $10 for the regular tier members from $30 to $40, and an increase of $25 to the plus tier for the plus tier members. But 15 of that will go into the future fund. Now, something else that the board has proposed for 2024 is to eliminate the couples membership. So that is in large part because the new software system will not allow couples to sign up as couples. Everybody has to sign up as an individual. So trying to price that out with a separate category with a different price structure is actually rather complicated. And the other thing is if you think about it, if you're a current plus couple, if only one of you wants to sell at a guild venue, you could probably get by with the other member being a regular member. So that was the thinking about eliminating the couples membership. And if you look back on that chart that I first showed, the couples membership has come and gone multiple times over the year, as has the student membership. And a current student membership is a regular student membership for $20. But the Guild thought about, these are the people that we really need to recruit into our Guild and to embrace. Those are the emerging artists that are in our community now that we need to support, and we need to bring them into the fold. If the Guild's going to continue for the next 20 or 30 years, these are the folks that are going to need to step up and run it. So we really want to reach out to them. But the one thing we changed with respect to student members is we said you had to be a full-time student. You have to be taking ceramics, but you have to be enrolled in 12 or more units. The 12 units don't need to be all ceramics units because you've got to take your GEs and all of that. But we are looking for this to apply to full-time high school and college students. So if I taking one class at Ventura College in ceramics, and that's all I'm taking, I would have to join as a regular member as a single member at either the regular or the plus tier. Now, these student members that are getting their free membership, they won't be able to sell. coming in as a regular member. So if they'd want to sell or they'd want to participate in the bulk orders or any of the other plus benefits, they would need to then pay the plus dues. So
Can I
it's-
ask,
Go ahead, although I'd like to sort of
Pay the difference.
say what?
I was gonna suggest that they be required to do team service hours as students.
So that's a good suggestion, and I would like to, at the end of this, I'm gonna propose how people can submit their comments and questions, but if it's okay, unless I'm saying something that you really don't understand, let me get through this, if you don't mind. So there's 4 reasons, basically, why that the guild feels justifies the dues in terms of the activities of the guild. One is the growth over the past year. There were 25 members in 1967. There are 118 now, 118 in 2015 and 174 in 2023. That is 7 times. There's 7 times the number of members in 67 as there are today. And even from 2015, it's an increase of 32%. This requires more work, and it's made the management of the membership more complicated. Gone are the days when this could be managed on an Excel spreadsheet. So I'm sure all of you know that in 2022, the Guild implemented a database to manage this, and it's gone really well. But there's a cost attached to this, and it required a significant number of volunteer hours. And I think we can thank Wynn and Terry and Foz for the, I don't know, maybe thousands of hours that they've put into making this work. 2, the benefits of membership and the activities of the Guild have evolved in number and complexity. Again, there's costs, both in terms of financial costs and people hours in managing this growth. There's more sales opportunities. There's more diverse monthly programs. We've gone international in terms of our monthly programs. And in part, we've been able to do this because we've offered a financial stipend to attract professional artists, and also because Foz and her team have spent significant numbers of hours searching out artists, finding things that they think that we would be interested in. We're having and are really wanting to step up more in-person events now that COVID's over. We've done that pit fire, that went really well. We're having a Christmas get-together in December 9th. We're going to have a workshop in February. We heard you guys say we want to spend more time together. We miss being together in person, one-on-one. So we want to step that up and hope to increase that in the future. Some of these things pay for themselves, but even when they pay for themselves, they require a lot of volunteer hours, and some of them cause us to incur modest costs. Then there's our new web home, VCPG. That's not just help with membership, but it's helped the community be able to see what we do and look at our work and know when we have things going on. And I think it's made a difference for people to be able to sign up for things. We can pay now with credit card. We don't have to write checks and put them in the mail. Again, an annual cost for this and lots of volunteer hours. The bulk clay orders 3 times a year. That provides Plus members with significant savings and convenience. I mean, I don't know what it would cost to go to Santa Ana and back now, but this is a big benefit to our Plus members, but it also requires significant volunteer hours. So that's the second reason. The third reason is increased community outreach. Outreach is a crucial part of our Guild's mission. I know. And it's also, I think, one of the most popular team service opportunities. And I know several members always remind us that it's not just about selling our pottery. Our mission is about promoting ceramics and reaching out to and educating and supporting the community who are interested in ceramics. And should the Guild create a 501c3, which we'll go into more detail when we're a little further along with that, because there's pluses and minuses to all of that. But I think perhaps the pluses outweigh the negatives of creating a 501c3. we would actually be legally required to not only sustain, but to grow our community outreach, because we go from a member benefit corporation to a community benefit corporation. We've already laid the foundation for that, but we would need to sustain that and grow that. We're currently providing financial rewards and awards and free memberships to local ceramic students. We have a summer mentorship program, and it's one of my favorite things that we do, and we're going to hear about them very soon in this very meeting from two of our most recent mentorship participants. And we're working on a pilot program to build the capacity of local high school art teachers to provide ceramic instruction. I mean, that's under design. And this would be Jennifer Robles is working on that. She put together a little pilot that a lot of you attended at the local high school. And you all were like, really, the feedback from that was a really positive experience. And you want to do more of that, and you want to do it in your other home communities. The fourth reason is all of this has relied on, I don't know, thousands, tens of thousands of volunteer hours per year. And is that really sustainable? You know, the board recognized in 2022 that in order to sustain what we've got going on right now, we need to get more members to participate in the Guild's activities. And that's what led to the creation of the Plus tier and team service. And again, the Plus tier was designed specifically for those members who use the expanded member benefits, and that we need their person power as well as some additional financial support to keep that going. And it's really worked. It's not only have you guys stepped up and provided the volunteer hours, there's 114 plus members, and almost all of you have been providing your team service hours for the last 2 years. Thank you. Thank you. It's not only gotten the work done, it's spread the workload across the Guild, all the way across. It's not 20 people, it's now 114 people. And I think, and I've heard people talk just anecdotally, it's people have really appreciated getting to meet new guild members and interact. It's another way to get together in person, depending on what the service is. But even with that, there are questions about whether we can rely solely on volunteer hours for our current Guild activities. One example, and I just pulled this out because I had a recent conversation with somebody about this just on the fly. You know, we ask a team to literally move tons of clay 3 times a year. And that's a lot to ask for people. And maybe we want to think about, you know, hiring people to do that 3 times a year. Maybe we want to think about renting storage space for the Guild's belongings, and maybe the clay order could be dropped there. I mean, there's just a lot of ways to kind of improve and sustain and evolve what we've already got going on that are going to cost us some money. So now those were sort of like the operational reasons why the board decided to raise the dues for 2024. But I'm going to tell you about the money, because I know a lot of the times along the way, people are like, we're selling so much pottery. You know, why are you raising our dues? We're doing so well. Why do you have to raise our dues? That's a really good question. And you guys have a right to know where the money's coming from and where the money's going. So I took a look at the actuals. Wanda has tracked every penny that we brought in and taken and spent for years and years and years. And I just took a look at the last 2 calendar years. So the Guild collects over $7,600 of income over their expenses. Member dues only account for 10% of the income. The majority of the income for the Guild comes from shows and sales. And 72% of that is returned to the artists. Likewise, the gallery collects an average of $8,900 of income over expenses. This is per year, not per month. This is per year. And gallery member dues account for 5% of the income. Again, the majority of gallery income is for sales, and the majority of gallery expenses is the 76% of the sales that get returned to the artist. So I just want to say something. We are a nonprofit. We do not make a profit. We cannot make a profit. The organization makes no profit. The people that make profit from the activities of the guild are the artists that supply their wares for sale. The income over expenses for the guild is 7%. If we were a for-profit retail enterprise, the guild would have a profit margin of 7%. The gallery would have a profit margin of 4%. And I can tell you there are not many for-profit retail establishments that would survive with those margins. Those are super thin margins. So how do we do it? Well, we do it with those thousands of volunteer hours that we were just talking about. That's how we do it. The other way we do it is we sort of have a unique cash flow situation. We collect the funds for the sale of the goods before we pay the provider of the goods. We don't pay you till you sell your pot. And Square pays us every day, and we pay you every week. That is not a cash flow structure that most for-profit retail establishments have. And they have to put out capital to buy their goods, keep them on their shelves, and hope somebody sells them in time that they can pay for their expenses. So we are really fortunate that that's the model that we have, and that we have so many people that are willing to pitch in their time and effort to make this work. That is the only way we have been able to sustain this. The Future Fund that we created in 2022 with the difference between the regular and plus membership tiers has a balance of $5,500 after 2 years. At the current dues level, this fund grows by approximately $2,700 a year. And since the beginning of the guild, an unencumbered balance, meaning a bank balance that doesn't have to go pay a bill, of approximately $48,000 is in the bank. Most of this has come from the gallery, from the inception of the gallery. So it took us, 12 years at this point? 12 years to accumulate that $48,000. So here's the question. Is the dues increase necessary to sustain our current activities and provide for a sustainable future? The board thinks that it does, that it is quite necessary. We are already in the process of upgrading our gallery's financial management system. We're hoping to implement QuickBooks by January 1st. Then there's keeping up with inflation. And this is a real issue. We were at $5 in 1964 and for a regular membership, and we're at $30 now. The 10% increase for both the regular membership and the tier membership, the portion not going to the Future Fund that are going in to cover the inflationary costs and our expansion costs of what we're doing now, are well within the increase of the cost of living over the relevant time periods. So again, even at the status quo, the guild may need to incur additional costs for our current activities, whether it's help with mode management, financial administration, the clay crew, professional services. I don't know. Things come up. Let's take a look at the Future Fund. We have a 2-year balance of $5,500. We have a projected annual Future Fund contribution, if the dues stay the same, of $2,700 every year. Once we increase the Future Fund contributions with the increase of the plus dues, we'll have an annual increase of $1,710, and for a total annual building increase of $4,400. At this rate, with the dues increase, it will take us an additional 10 years to accumulate a balance of $50,000. Now, $50,000 sounds like a lot of money. I wish I had $50,000 in my hand right now. I wish I'd win the lottery for $50,000. But when you're operating when you're operating an organization that has a budget of more than $200,000 a year, $50,000 isn't that much, and $50,000 is not that much when we talk about some of our future desires, like opening a second gallery, or any kind of capital project. I wouldn't recommend opening a second gallery unless we have 6 months of operating reserve in the bank, and $50,000 is a lot, but it's not a whole lot. We do have other funds for future projects. We have that $48,000 that's sitting there, and we have the balance, the income over the expenses that both the guild and the gallery are accumulating. But remember that almost all that extra money that the guild and the gallery are accumulating annually, that's soft money. That's from sales. That could go up or that could go down. So that's, it's soft money. The $48,000 is hard money. If we have the dues coming in, that's money that we can count on to build for the future. But at any rate, a significant portion of these dollars, $20,000 minimum, needs to be held as an operating reserve or a rainy day fund for what we've got going on now. Okay. So, okay, why do we need $50,000? Why do we need to spend that with the $48,000? Well, I don't know. And this is where we really need you to tell us. Some things have come up. I mentioned finding a second gallery location because that's on the top of a lot of people's mind. I don't know if all of you know this, but the gallery committee and the gallery members pretty much decided the gallery is full. We contemplated reconfiguring some of the space to allow more people to come in, and it's just not feasible. So at any point in time, the current gallery cannot put another person in. There might be some rotations or something like that, but at any point in time, the number's never going to go higher than what it is at this moment. People talked about finding a location, sort of like a mini clay studio in Galita, where we have studio space, we can have classes, we can have workshops, we could have individual studio space, something like that. We want to expand and enhance our current member benefits, expand and enhance our outreach to the community, improve guild management, all of the things that we've been talking about. And I don't know what the gallery, what the membership, the board needs data. We need to know what you guys think. We have a pretty good idea what the board thinks. We have a pretty good idea about what the gallery committee and the gallery members think, but that's only like a quarter to a third of you all. So we need to know what you think. Again, this increase of dues is under the purview of the board, and the board has the responsibility of looking out for the well-being of the organization as a whole and as its members. But we want to know what your thoughts about this are. So if you have suggestions or questions, like what Jody's suggestion was about having the students do team service too, please email them to me at secretary. I'm still the secretary. I'm not the president until January 1st. secretary@vcpg.org by November 1st, and I'll collate them and I will present them at the next board meeting. In the registration for your 2024 membership, there are going to be survey questions that are going to be designed to help craft a shared sustainable vision of the Guild's future. We're not going to make it long and involved. We might use some kind of survey tricks to be able to sort of gauge what your priorities are. We're going to send that out to you in advance right before we release the registration for renewal and new membership. And I really hope that you guys really think about it, because we really want to know what you guys think. And members are always welcome to attend the board meetings. There's always a link to them in the newsletter. You can receive a board packet in advance by contacting the secretary at the email above. And you can also email the secretary and ask to be put on a board interest list. And then you automatically receive the link to the board meeting and the packet every month via email. And that's it. So I'm gonna go back. We need to move on because of time. Win wants to has something very important to share, and we really want to hear from the students in the mentorship program. But is there anything that somebody really doesn't understand that they need and want to clarify at this point? I went fast, I know, I do that. Okay,
Okay,
please email us what you think, and please really think about what you'd like to see the future look like when you respond to the questions on the registration form. Thank you.
Thanks, Stacy, for presenting all that financial information about where the money's going, et cetera.
It's you need to know.
okay, moving on. As Stacy said, if anything comes up percolating in your mind over the next couple of days, send her an email. All right, I'm going to share my screen. And you see this video? Yes? Okay.
Can't hear it though.
Can't hear it?
Nope.
Nope.
There wasn't music in the background, was there?
No? Hang on a second. I have an idea. Sales documents. Let's try it again.
Okay.
Hi. If you don't know me, I'm Wynn Matthews. I'm the president of the Potter's Guild. And
No?
6 months ago, the board was in the process of updating the existing jury documents and chosen sales documents. It struck me that just updating the existing documents may not serve us. And I asked the board for permission to set up a special committee to look at the jury process and how that affects chosen sales as if we had no documents, as if a group of us were consultants that were brought in to look at the needs and come up with a recommended process and then look back at the existing documents. So I invited 5 other people to participate in that process. I asked Erica Posey to manage the meetings, the conversation, and the inquiry, which she did a phenomenal job doing. A couple of the key recommendations are that we invite and allow almost anything anyone could do with ceramics. And there are some boundaries in there, which you can see in the documents. We also recommend that we accept collaborative work, and not just between potters, but if I make pots and I have a friend who's a painter who I invite to decorate my pots, that's acceptable within the guidelines that are in the documents. Also, that the jury process changed from the current pre-jury and final jury to actual 2 opportunities to jury in the spring and 2 opportunities in the fall. And that if you pass that first of the 2, say, spring juries, you don't have to come back for the second one. You pass the jury. If you didn't, you get feedback, some mentoring if you like it, between the first jury and the second jury, and you have a second opportunity to pass the jurying. There are a number of other things in terms of process, and this is just a heads up. So what I'm going to do is post this video to Member Connect, along with links to the documents and links to 2 Zoom meetings, where any of you that are interested in having a more detailed conversation after looking at the documents, or you have recommendations of what you think might be a better way to do anything we've recommended, we're open. So personally, conversations I've had individually with a number of people as we've gone through this process, they've had fabulous ideas that we've incorporated into the process. So it's still a malleable process. We're looking for suggestions on how to improve it. And if you want to play in that arena with us, come to one of the Zoom meetings. If you can't make either of those meetings, one will be during the day, one will be in the evening. If you can't make either of those meetings, email me directly at president@vcpg.org, and we'll work out something. We'll set up another meeting. We'll have a private conversation. But anyone that wants to be involved, we want to make sure that you have an opportunity to give us feedback. Thanks.
That's it. Yeah, nothing else to say there. You'll see that plus some supporting documentation and so forth in Member Connect soon. So the last thing here is the residencies, and I'm going to hand it off to Luann to manage that process, that conversation.
Okay, we actually have 3 artists that participated in our summer residency program this year. And one of them was with Clayzen and Wynn Matthews as a mentor, and that's Izzy Catalano. And then we had 2 people at Clay Studio in Goleta with 2 different mentors, James Haggerty and Isaiah Porter. So we're going to start off with Izzy. So Izzy, are you there?
Hi, yeah.
Yeah, why don't you share your screen and give us your presentation.
Everyone can see it?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So for this summer, my focus was trying things out that I had maybe seen previously, but never, taken the initiative to try out. And some things that I wanted to do, or that Wynn had suggested doing last summer, that we ended up getting to this summer. Ooh, is that too loud? The first thing that I had focused on were a lot of closed form jars. The video isn't the steadiest thing in the world, but it's the making of the pots next to it. So, it's pretty much very similar to thin necks and tall thin necks, but finishing it and closing it. And as I was kind of taking away the excess slip, this ledge kind of appeared. So I decided to make it a bit more prominent. And the handle didn't look quite finished until that point was added, in my opinion. So once these were ready to trim, I used a chuck to trim them, and then a thin wire to create that key that separates the lid from the pot itself, which keeps it on the pot from going back and forth, but side to side, there's really nothing that would prevent it. So 2 coils placed opposite of each other to just keep it tight and secure. And so I did a few of these. I really enjoyed making them. And all were done with the thin wire making that key and the coils placed on the side. This one's pretty similar to the first one, with the pronounced ledges and the pointed handle. You can kind of see the coil a little better in the opened photo, I think. And that one, I pretty much liked using about 1.5 pounds, maybe 2 pounds to make them. It was usually towards the end of my clay bags that I was like, well, it's not really that much to make a sizable bowl. not a big vase, but it would do the job for these jars. And I had seen a lot of these little incense burners and chimeneas. So, you know, once the incense or the Palo Alto wood chips were put in, the smoke comes out like a chimney. So these were thrown like little, they're probably about 4 inches tall, I think. And the one in the middle and the one to the right of it were my first 2, and then I really liked how they came out, so I continued with that. I also used a chuck to trim these. The one on the left is flat, but the rest of them, I took 3 little balls of clay and then scored and added them almost like these little peg feet. But they were really stable, and then those openings were made and smoothed out. But I made a lot of them. I really enjoyed them. And glazing, all of them were finished on the inside with a white glaze, and then the outside was just, I think, whatever glaze was next to me, pretty much, because I like leaving a good portion of it bare, because I really like the bare clay next to the usually shiny satiny glaze. You can see the feet a little better in this. But I really enjoyed them, and as I continued making them, I realized I prefer them pretty stout, kind of bulbier, and that just makes, I think, for more room to cut that gallery in. The next thing kind of happening at the same time as the incense burners was taking 2 pieces and combining them to make 1 piece. I just included this a little bit because it took us about 3 minutes just to separate the bat from the top of it. But one half of it has this pointed rim and the other one has this valley almost, and once flipped, they join really nicely. And once they're put together, I would apply pressure to make that join a little smoother, and then start throwing it. And you can see in the pictures next to it, it's not the most even, but this was my first attempt at it, and it was really, really neat to try something that was very scary to me, in my opinion. But I kept it pretty traditional with the shape, at least the high shoulders and narrow foot. But it definitely isn't the most even thing. In terms of glazing, I once it came out, I realized what I had done. I added a Shino on top of another glaze, but that's what caused this kind of really interesting textured band towards the bottom of the pot. I think it kind of looks like a landscape almost, but that really rocky texture added something that otherwise it would have been, I think, a nice pot, but it really just finished it off in a way that I hadn't originally intended. But I'm super excited with how it came out. And there's another video of pretty much the same thing, different shape. And this one, I think, kind of see the join of it a little better. And my intention with this pot was taller, but I wanted it, you can see that it didn't happen, for the finish to be more of like a flared out trumpet horn towards the rim. And as I continued pulling it, that's not really what the client wanted to do, so I just kind of allowed it to take shape even more. But I really tried focusing on pulling up as much clay as I could, because I have an issue with leaving quite a lot of clay at the bottom. So I wanted to not, I guess, waste as much clay or trim off a whole lot. So that's sort of the shape that I was intending, with that flared not super straight, but flared out rim. And I think that this is where that doesn't really continue happening. And once it had started stiffening up a little bit more, I wanted to kind of add more emphasis to the curved bell of it, I think. So once it had stiffened up a little bit, I just kind of rounded it out a little bit more with my thumb. And the glaze, it's the clay is Russian River, so it has like that brownish red finish to it once it's completely fired. And I thought that that complemented the green glaze pretty nicely. And I had never had the opportunity to make glazes before, so these were Chinos, and I hope I don't get this wrong, Wynn, but I think the reason for doing these test tiles is because the source of spodumene had run out. So this spodumene, it was testing the new spodumene source with varying levels of iron. So we did 0.5, 1%, and 2% iron in all of these. So at the bottom right, that is them with the water completely sifted and mixed. And these are the test tiles, all on porcelain, but the test tiles had been dipped once, fully, half, twice, and then a corner of it 3 times. And the slabs themselves were all brushed on, just varying levels of brushed once, twice, and 3 times. That was Bill Law's Chino, and this was Malcolm's Chino, and basically the same process, 0.5%, 1%, 2%, and mixed and sifted through. And these are them all on the test tiles, and this was the result. The Malcolm's Chino, the one on the farthest left, should be opposite, but they're pretty much all in order with them. And these are all of Bill Law's with their percentages, and Malcolm's. And I don't think any of the results were exactly what maybe Wynn had in mind. Not enough to make a bigger batch of them. So I liked Bill Law's enough that I ended up putting it on this porcelain pot. I really liked the way the iron came out in it, and I just finished it with a shiny white glaze with these flowers over it. And I used it to get more on 2 other pots with a pretty different result, which was more user error. I hadn't brushed on enough layers of it. It wasn't a thick enough application of them with the same shiny white over it, but it was really exciting being able to do these testing glazes. And the last thing we had looked at was ginger jars and their lids. It was the first time I had made a pot and then a lid to match it, to fit on top. So the trimming was pretty tedious, just making sure that it fits securely, not too loose and not too tight. And these were the finished pieces. And then these were just miscellaneous, kind of like the results of pieces that I was happiest with, and that I had tried different things with. This was just trimming in this new kind of texture, these ledges. And this piece was the tallest to come out. It was about 9.5 inches, I think. And as I was throwing it, I thought I had gotten everything from it, and Wynn was like, and I just kept tried stretching it to the most that it would go. And then oil dispensers, I got these little spouts from Amazon and did the shrink measured the shrink rate. And they came out and they fit really great. And the bowl next to it, it's a pretty shallow bowl, but it was the widest bowl that I had thrown. I'm pretty sure ever. And this was a picture that came out. And this was a mug. I just messed around with a few different glazes. There's 2 glazes on the inside and I think 3 on the outside. And I really loved the matte yellow mixing with this. It's ice celadon, I think. And it just brought out these yellow crystals that when they're hit just right in the sun, it's really beautiful, and I was really happy with that. And I don't know if the glaze would look familiar to people. I threw this pot very early on in the residency and just kind of left it on a shelf for the entirety because I just didn't know what I wanted to do with it. If I wanted to, I just wasn't sure. So very last minute, it went into a bisque, and I had left it there right before a glaze kiln was about to go in. And Wynn very nicely asked if I would like him to glaze it for me, and I wasn't going to pass that opportunity up. So I said yes, and I think it came out really beautifully, and I really appreciate him doing that for me. And I want to thank the Ventura County Potters Guild for letting me do this again. I really appreciate it. And I want to thank Wynn too for all of your time and your patience and really taking the time with me. And thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Wynn.
No, I was just say thank you. I don't get to do what I love to do unless you do what you love to do.
Thank you.
Yeah, we can see how much you've grown since last summer. So it's really cool that seeing your progression over this recent residency program.
Thank you.
So
I appreciate that.
yeah, thank you, Izzy, for presenting. Okay, we're going to move on to Max Gaines, who worked in Clay Studio with Isaiah as his mentor. So Max, are you available? Hello.
Yes. Hi.
Oh, there you are.
See me, hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
So can you share your screen?
Yeah.
There we go. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Max Gaines. I'm from Santa Barbara, California. I just finished college this past spring, or actually this past summer at George Washington University in Washington, D.C., where I studied marketing, but also I started making ceramics and pottery while I was at school. And ultimately that led me to apply to the residency. I knew about the residency because I had met Luann last summer and was familiar and knew Connor, one of the residents last summer. And so I was kind of thinking about applying to this for the past year, and I'm glad that I did. So a little bit of what I made over the summer. I really wanted to continue working on some forms and concepts that I had been playing around with a bit at school. So that really was like incorporating gestural elements and movement into my pots and sort of moving away from strict rules for myself, like kind of not trying to have everything be so perfect. I felt like I got to a place with my technical skill that I could sort of let go of some more, I guess, traditional guidelines that I set for myself. So here's a couple of the first pots that I made on my first day at the residency this summer. I made a lot of pots. So these pots just kind of incorporate some of those elements that I like exploring. So like sort of loose lines. I'll often like pull up the walls of a pot pretty thin, such that like it wants to collapse, and I sort of try to guide it into collapsing in different ways that I think sort of accentuate lines in a nice way, and make the pot sort of dance, and can encourage glazes to pool and shift in different ways. Here's a couple of other pots with that example. I definitely have been drawn repeatedly back to some sort of like round bulbous jar shape with a prominent rim. I think those, for whatever reason, I think maybe that pot, that sort of form has a lot of shapes and elements that I like. Maybe it just is somewhat symmetrical and simple, and that's what attracts me. I'm not entirely sure, but I find myself continuing to go back to it. But with these pots, I think it's pretty apparent that I started to mess around with some mark making that I ultimately decided to stick with for most of the summer, and really explore how I could utilize it on different surfaces and shapes. And so I basically, all of the markings that are here with like my standard tools. So I think like either a needle or the wooden knife, or just my fingers. Yeah, here, so just a tall bottle shape, kind of bringing in the sides rather than a bulbous shape, just trying to basically give myself another surface to put these marks on and refine some of the details like the rims. I started to play around with the idea of folding over the lip of the pot onto itself to sort of create a stacked rim effect, and I came to really like how that looked, the one rim sitting on another, especially when I sort of altered one of the components of it and left the other more clean. These are a couple of sectional pots that I made more early on in the summer. I've always been fascinated by large scale wheel thrown work and like other large scale forms of ceramic arts, but specifically on the wheel. I think something about how the wheel demands so much of your attention that with any project when you're sitting down on it. I think like as you scale up, that sort of gets more intensified, and the importance to really pay attention gets a lot higher. And I also kind of like the idea of like having to step away from the wheel and stand back really to even get a grasp of what your pot actually looks like. There's something pretty exciting about the process of making work like that just keeps me making large work. So these pieces in specific were, exercising some work with sectional pieces, but also trying to play a little bit more conceptually with design. And so I thought it would be fun to make some pieces that were a little confusing to the onlooker. And so I tried to make these bottles look like they were maybe upside down. And as I was making them, I got lots of comments or questions like asking if they were upside down or if they were meant to be some other orientation. And that definitely pleased me because that's what I was going for. Here's another sectional pot. On the left's a video that I think Luann took this of me. I look like I am compressing maybe this sort of tricky, physically tricky spot on this sectional piece. It's a lot of weight that gets put on that really narrow base when you're working on the very top section of the sectional. The way that I've come to like to work with large sectional pots is I like to keep everything very wet because I want to be able to manipulate it sort of through to the end of the process as much as I can. And if I want to be able to impart the marks that I want to make and some of the alterations, the clay kind of needs to be wet enough to work with through to the end. So kind of making some subtle but important movements down there. So here's a few more pieces that I think just nicely demonstrate some of the elements that I've been keeping up with throughout the summer, and definitely feel happy that I explored them well. So on the left is a platter. I guess I sort of took more of an artsy shot of this and not an informational one, but there's a big split rim that goes around this platter. And I imparted that before squeezing out different sections with my fingers, and I think that's an interesting design. This cup in the middle is sort of resembles a lot of cups that I've been making recently, where I tried to section the clay into sort of two different spaces and make it look like it's a multiple part piece when it's really not. It's just maneuvering the rib in a way that sort of makes the clay stack over itself, and also altering it into a more triangular shape is something that I've been really fond of doing recently. And on the right sort of demonstrates like a pretty strong juxtaposition and angles that I like to use. I mean, it's resembled in the cup in the middle as well, but a very sharp diagonal angle at the bottom of a pot really looks nice to me, and I think gives a lot of tension to the piece. So I sort of went even further with that concept of a tight angle at the bottom with this pot here, and like a really kind of aggressive change of shape back into like this really small bottle neck. I really wanted to pay attention to the details of the rim on this, and my mark making started to get quite refined at this point in the summer. I felt like my throwing was really on point from lots of hours of practice, and so I'm happy with how this form came out, and it really like sent me into a new direction of pieces. So this is another piece that sort of followed that one, where I really ran away with the form and thought sort of the form spoke enough of itself that it didn't really need the mark making or the rim that I had been adding to pieces before, and I ended up really liking how this piece looked on its own. This was another pretty logistically difficult piece to make. It's made in sections, and with that huge sort of angle at the bottom, distributing weight with a sort of wet piece of clay gets a little tricky. So I had to use some different elements of heat and whatnot to keep everything working. Here's a couple other iterations of this sort of shape. I like to think of them as some sort of bell. On the left, I added a couple of attachments that I've used in some other pieces. On the right, I try to just keep it simple and play with some proportions. These pieces are really fun to make. So with this piece, I sort of got bored with the mark making that I was doing before, and then got bored with just the clean lines on those forms that I was exploring, and thought it was time to reintroduce some texture and mark making, but in a bit more of a rustic way this time, and a bit more aggressive. So I got a bunch of slabs of clay and just started to make marks into them to figure out like what I thought I liked, and then sort of went away with this pot and wanted to make it look not only like capture the textures that I created on that slab before, but also I wanted it to look like there was a slab on the pot itself. I looked into some videos of hat makers, and I don't know if anybody's ever seen a hat maker make a hat like a cowboy hat maker. They stretch the leather or the suede over this big kind of head shape, and when they stretch it down, I think it has such an interesting look. And so I kind of tried to mimic this with stretching a slab over the top of the pot. And I continued to play with this a bit more with other shapes as well. This one, a bit of a more tall and narrow shape, but similar idea of like that kind of stretched slab on the top. But this one I kind of wanted to give more of an ode to clothing, and I think this one kind of gives more of a dress look to it. This is sort of a different approach that I took to that slab over the pot effect, rather than sort of stretching the pot or stretching the slab over the pot to conceal it. I play with the idea of maybe like cloaking the pot with a wrap or some kind of cloak. So I did that with this pot as well. Then another version, sort of refining the idea after figuring out some logistic hiccups with the last one. This is another piece where I tried to mimic this slab over pot look, but I started to play with poking holes all the way through the pot on this. I was using a lot of dots or impressions before with the back of a needle tool at the beginning of the summer, and that was a bit too clean of a mark to make on this style of a pot, and so I needed to figure out something that was a bit more rough. And I think that this really hit it for me. This is another similar pot. I felt like this kind of showcases a lot of the mark making and texturizing that I was able to come to over the summer. And I'm pretty happy with how this piece turned out. Here's a few just final examples of just some random pots that I took videos of. There are probably 100 other pots that I made over the summer that I didn't capture anything of, but it all sort of looks somewhat like these. Got a big charger plate on the left, and this middle, like sort of birdhouse looking pot. Was interested in maybe mimicking some architectural elements in my pottery. And on the right is this was just an interesting afternoon platter. So just want to show some images of the work that you just saw finished. Glazing and firing was a pretty eye-opening component of the summer for me, which I really felt like solidified some preferences for myself with my work, but also like inspired me on some new paths of exploration with materials and types of firing. So these are some pieces that I glazed with an ash glaze, plus some other glazes in combination, but I came to really love the look of ash glazes, really because I was inspired by wood firing, but wood firing is a tough thing to access in Southern California, or at least in my position. And so I try my best to find things that could mimic that, or that could give me similar elements to how wood-fired surfaces tend to look. And so ash glazes were a good place to start, I think. I also learned how to spray my own glazes this summer, which I think really helps to capture some of the elements of a wood fire or an atmospheric firing. These two pieces are also some combination of an ash glaze with another glaze, and experimenting with spraying and layering in different thicknesses, and firing and heavy reduction firing. These pots are sort of, I guess, like mark the start of some experimentation with Shino glazes. Similar to the ash glazes, the Shino glazes to me very much resemble a lot of wood-fired and atmospheric surfaces like soda firing. And I was really blown away with the variation of surface that you could get from one single glaze recipe on one type of clay. So all the clay, or all the pots that you see that look like a Shino in my presentation are glazed with the same Shino glaze and the same studio recycled clay that I got entitled to over the summer. And I just really love how different the final surface product can be with this one glaze. So the pot on the left was a pot that we saw, I guess both these pots we saw earlier, but this is both with the same Shino glaze. I started to try to experiment with different ways of applying the glaze and letting it dry in different conditions. I also was really lucky to have the opportunity to learn how to fire a gas kiln this summer from James Haggerty. And so we got to fire a couple of different times over the summer where I got to really influence the type of firing, the amount of reduction, the time we held for temperature, and what temperature we ultimately got to, the stack of the kiln. And that was really nice to be able to have a lot of control in how things were fired in my end result. And I think my pieces show for it. These are, just some more pieces that we saw earlier, but again, apply with the Shino. I really tried to focus on spraying specific parts of the pot and hoping to encourage some like coagulation of soda ash, which can create these crystals and the carbon trapping with these like dark spots on the pot to sort of mimic the wood fire look. These pieces both have like a bit of a different alteration to them. The pot on the left actually was fired once with Shino. I wasn't so happy with how it looked, so I glazed it again, and I actually left the pot while it was glazed raw in the rain, and allowed like a lot of the glaze to wash off and also collect a lot of the minerals from the rainwater. And so that's like a lot of the rivulet sort of effect that you see on the left, and it also picked up a sort of an incredible luster where the gold parts are very reflective. The piece on the right, I sprayed with the Shino glaze, but also with a layer of soda ash. That's what really created this sort of celadon-like surface that really surprised me over the Shino. These are just some sort of smaller pots that I made that implement some elements that I use a lot of this summer, sort of just as experiments, but I ended up really liking them. These two pots were also glazed and left in the rain. So a lot of the glaze washed off the top and was allowed to run down. And then I sprayed the top of them with some natural ash just to kind of give them a sheen. Just some more pots also with the same Shino. The pot on the right, I really went heavy with some ash that Luann gave me. And I just applied the Shino, and while it was wet, threw kind of some handfuls of ash, and I really like how it turned out. So that's my work from the summer. I guess I just want to thank the Ventura County Potters Guild for giving me the opportunity to apply to the residency and also to award me the membership at Clay Studio. I really feel like I got a lot out of this summer. It was a very valuable experience for me. And I hope that the Guild continues to offer this to students in the future, because I think it's a great resource. Thank you.
Thank you, Max. Thanks, Max. That was great. We appreciate it. It's almost midnight here, so I'm not really on it. But if anybody has any questions or anything, now's the time for Max. Okay, so we're going to move on to our last summer resident, who's Dana Hidalgo. I don't know, I'm probably saying that wrong. Dana, are you there?
Hi, yes.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so you worked with James Haggerty as your mentor, and yeah, please give us your presentation, share your screen for us.
For sure. I'm gonna just go on ahead and set that up. Hopefully it works accordingly, but I'm gonna both mute and turn off video for that, and then play the video.
Dana, you can't mute yourself because we can't hear your presentation then.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, let me for sure. I'll do that again. Get that going. Okay. So just please.
Infinity,
Oh,
Play
okay,
Studio,
maybe I'll just play actually.
James Haggerty,
Let's use this instead.
Hi everyone, my name is Dana.
Can everyone hear? Is that
Hidalgo.
working?
Just want to start off by thanking the Ventura Potters Guild for this opportunity. Clay Studio, James Haggerty, Luann Smith, Matt Mitros, and the Clay community at Clay Studio. I am just so thankful for the opportunity to have learned from so many people who are so generous with their knowledge. And yeah. All right, so just want to start off with this image here. I'm originally from Hawaii. I'm born and raised, and I moved to California, Santa Barbara, for the UCSB art program. I'm currently a grad student in my 3rd year. And for whatever reason, I was just, actually, no, I know the reason. I was really happy to move because I lived alone for the first time, and I didn't have to sit with all my dad's junk. Well, really, it's all our junk, but mostly his junk. He's a hoarder. And so I had this moment of, you know, relief from this particular tension back home, but also really missed home. And I think I was really interested in that kind of dichotomy of emotions where it's like, I feel relief, but then also I miss home and everyone. And this kind of painting came from that feeling. And also kind of just relating that tenderness and vulnerability of my parents sleeping on the couch against their hoard, I think is, I don't know, like how I think a lot of children may sometimes see their parents, where they're thinking about them in all their nuances of sacrifice and love and anger. And I think that kind of was what this painting came from. But yeah, moving along, these are just some still close-ups of this painting. And this funny little 4-scale image, which is a 6x8 painting out on a basketball court. And yeah, and so I felt like I feel like I'm quite receptive and reactive to my surroundings. So moved from family to friends here in Santa Barbara. So these people are in the cohort. But kind of also realizing too that like I've been painting people for so long, like other people for so long, that I felt really inclined to make my own. And so I felt like I would do that, and I got really dramatic about it and made myself into a nude. But also thinking about Titian's Venus of Urbino, Manet's Olympia, and kind of really entering this art history lineage, but commenting also on just how the male artist catapults their career with these female nudes. And I think I was really interested as like a female artist, how I am both, you know, female nude and female artist. And so yeah, that kind of relationship. And I think, yeah, I'm just gonna put these feet in real quick because I think I get complimented a lot on them. So yeah, the painting of the feet. And so yeah, I think thinking about myself became a pivotal point in my artistic development, that it really informs my ceramic making. And so this image here is a jar I made in 2017 that for whatever reason stuck with me aesthetically, that if I ever made an urn would just kind of look like this, but like urn size, right? And so that kind of sparked this urn project where I felt inclined to obsessively find and create my urn, but kind of going through the motions of like the testing and the finding of what exactly the perfect urn for myself would look like. And so I started creating shapes and forms, just kind of playing with all those things and figuring out what I liked outside of this particular aesthetic, just to see if there was something else besides this that I was really interested in. But in doing this, I think it felt very solemn and serious that I kind of got bored with it. So I started playing with the surface, starting to write in journal entries onto the form, and it kind of evolved to encompass daily mundane life against these, you know, representations of death. And I think it was really interesting for me to start playing with the surface of these jars, reflective of daily life. These are just some examples of the form, playing around with that. And I think what was really interesting, that it kind of almost felt like a recording of oneself through time, in like jar, vessel, urn form. Not to say that that version of myself died, but now there's this tangible reflection of oneself or like one's interest during that time period. And then during that time period, I was just really into Raku because I got the chance to do a lot of that during this program. And so, which shout out to Izzy, super happy to have done that with them. Yeah, so flipping through real quick. And then just a quick video on getting that reflective surface. And as mentioned, like I think the Raku process will, you know, I'll talk about that again, but how that burning and that quickness, like almost like being like a co-creator with the firing process was a really interesting thing. Oh, okay, just want to go and move on. Oh, right, cool. And so, you know, as a painter, like, you know, trying to find a way to bridge the two was something that was interesting to me, but I was kind of apprehensive to do. But, you know, I just want to try it, and so I did. And I think this particular one with its color relation and its like bodily-esque form, something that I enjoyed doing, but I particularly enjoy the color combo and painterly marks. Tried to be more illustrative, and then kind of also playing with how like the birds kind of create its own texture and play with like ineligibility. That's not right. Making it more difficult to read, but also, you know, ineligible. No, that's different. Illegible. There you go. Okay, so yeah, kind of just making the shadow make it more activated, I would suppose is a good word. And then of course Raku again, hair, that's my own hair, and that kind of starts to play more into other pieces. Then just some quick slides on an installation I did at the Glassbox Gallery at UCSB. And of course, I'm sure this is very telling that I'm a two-dimensional artist first and foremost, and I don't know how to put anything on a pedestal. But anyways, hair, this is another instance where I do kind of experiment with using hair as a means of activating a surface of a vessel. Just a quick video of that process. I'm sure people are really familiar, but yeah, I just like would collect my hair. Originally I was gonna felt with it. I still have enough to do both, like to burn and to felt, but this came first, and I just, you know, creating these marks with a timeline is kind of just like, you know, really needing to be intuitive with the process. All right, let's keep going. And then, yeah, so of course, hair, what's after hair is skin. And so, right, you know, when you collect the dry bits from your really dry heels, there's like a powder. And so I took my powder skin and threw it on the pot in a similar motion, just to like really thinking about like the burning of one's body, but still actively being alive, right? It's kind of like a point that was really interesting for me. Just some close-ups of that. Just for the sake of time, I'm gonna skip that video. Okay, no. And then, yeah, so hair, but then also really enjoying the way that the hair kind of looked even as it was burned. I think there's more sides than that. And then, yeah, also being really interested in the phallic form. Use that also just to see what the hair would look like. But the remnants of hair that didn't burn was also really interesting to me. And it was incredibly fragile, and this doesn't exist anymore. But this, at least for me, I feel like would be something that would be really interesting in the future. I put them together, and I called this, I think, hair, skin, and ales, just because I think that firing process as like a healing mechanism was kind of like the way to heal ailments. This is my heal skin powder specifically for Raku. And then, yeah, for the most of my life, having thrown since 2015 at the earliest, I never really threw anything larger than mugs and like maybe like small jars. And so I really wanted to get to a point where I was throwing more height. And so I would just use my Hydro Flask as a means of like, seeing how far I got. Yeah. Right. And then so another line that I got really interested in making for whatever reason were phallic forms. Just gonna flip through these for the sake of time. Yeah, and I think at this point I'm can't really take anything super seriously, that I do enjoy little funny things, and I think they're, I don't know, not hilarious, but I just enjoy making them. And really I think it comes from this behavior by default to use humor as a crutch for either anxiousness, stress, fear. And so, not to say that these were things that I'm not like literally scared of these things, just that maybe they were representational of like vulnerability and intimacy, and that kind of plays a lot in my work. And so just kind of humorizing the phallic form, pairing them with baby's breath, and just like that kind of relationship made it more almost like digestible. And then Raku also. And so I'm just gonna flip through some Raku forms. Really enjoyed that process of experimenting and exploring forms with these super pretty reflective glazes. This one especially, it's like fire captured. And then yeah, just some quick images of other forms I made just because I was interested in trying to throw larger, and for whatever reason turned into vases. And experimenting with, it's a failed attempt at throwing something thin. I think I like trimmed it and then it just flew off the bat. But yeah, just kind of experimenting with things. And this here was just like a cookie cutter that someone left, and kind of also as an painter, right? Like, how can the brush emulate a new mark with the same tool? And so this kind of was an attempt to take that tool and figure out how that would create different marks, like when I drag it, when I push it, when I tap it, sort of situation. And of course, in this cacophony of ideas and divergence, like I just don't get around to glazing. And so this is just like all the things I have yet to glaze, but will glaze. And yeah, I recap real quick in the next minute or so that I do think I have left. Urns, really enjoy doing. I think it takes some sort of humor for me to remain interested in things sometimes, but really love the idea of it becoming a record of daily life, still trying to understand why the urn itself as a representation of death seems appropriate to depict this daily life experience. The use of my body in Raku, I think, is also something that I gravitate to a lot. Kind of very different, of course, aesthetically, and the body maybe not be as, like the vessel itself, not be as important to that conversation as the urn, but this use of the body and its burning has been really interesting to me. And then, of course, like the phallic forms have just been, for what have been, really fun to do. And I just think they're funny, and I just make a lot of them. And yeah, that is me. And for the sake of time, I will just cut this off just like this. Thank you. Bye. All right, cool. Yep, that was me. And yeah, that let me see, stop broadcasting, come back. Okay. Yes. Yeah, thank you. It was a really cool opportunity to work at Clay Studio.
Thanks, Dana. Nice. We appreciate that. It was really wonderful working with all the summer residents this year. I think we had a wonderful summer. Really successful.
I'm really impressed with the work that they did, all of them. I mean, they're just so creative.
Yeah, very much. Very different, all of them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I say this every time. This is like one of the most favorite things that we do as a guild is doing this mentorship program. It's really wonderful. Thank you for sharing your work.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I'm on the other end, being one of the, the mentors during the residencies. It's one of my favorite things too, from that end. It's like part of it is, I'm probably not alone here, but part of it's age and how long I've been doing this, and it becomes partly like a responsibility for sharing it with other people starts to show up increasingly as I get older. And yeah, so I thank the Guild for the opportunity to do that. And then people show up. So.
Yeah, we had a lot of interest this year. We had a lot of applicants. Didn't we have around between 14 and 17 people apply for the residency program this year? So it was really really pretty cool that we could offer it to 3 people.
We should work on upping that.
Yeah.
I want to thank the residents too. I think it was fabulous to see so much talent and so much creativity. It was really inspiring. Thank you.
Okay, everyone, I think we're done. We did our vote raising.
Very lovely to see all of those people do what they're doing and the growth that they have accomplished for the time they spent. It's impressive. Well done, you guys. Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you again. Really cool to have shared my work with y'all and for the opportunity. Have a good rest of your night. Bye.
Thank you too. Bye.
Thank you, Wynn. Thank you, Stacy. Congratulations, everybody.
Thank you.
Everyone.
We did it.
I'm on hearing aids. They can't hear me.
When I sign off, I think everyone's going to sign off.
Thank you.
Bye.
Well, thank you. Good night, everybody.